Rightio, awesome. Well, we're a bit flustered here, but the next person to come up to speak. When I was asked, I'm a part of the World Suicide Prevention Day Committee. I don't do much except for wait till everyone speaks, and I usually drop a hammer of information in there, then I leave. But they asked me who should I get to speak. Who do you reckon we should get to speak this year? And I've made it my absolute purpose to have this man come up and have a yarn. We were very worried that he wasn't going to make it with everything going on down south, but he did make it. This man, to me, as a veteran, is the epitome of what it is to be a soldier. No matter the rank, no matter the job, no matter the time served or the deployments you've done, we're a soldier first when we're in the Army, and we're in the Navy and Air Force. And this man led the way and led the charge in getting a Royal Commission into veteran suicide. It was always hard to believe that we had to beg, borrow and steal to get that Royal Commission to happen. But because of the work that Heston has done, and a few other people, he wasn't on his own, a few other people did to get the Royal Commission, I can't thank him enough as a veteran, and I can't thank him enough for being here today. So without further ado, could you please give a warm welcome to Heston Russell. Got to do like a handshake and all that shit.
I can work in the dark, it's easier. I have, right. Well, thank you, Matthew. It's funny, I get nervous after an intro like that and someone's just come up and belted an amazing ballad for us. And it's great to just, even on a day like today, get a bit of inspiration from someone like you've seen before, listening to Sizzle before as well. I want to start my story with a bit of lived experience. So 2 weeks ago, or 30th of August last year, I sat in my Sydney apartment and planned on how I was going to take my own life. I wrote a plan, I wrote a speech for Jackie Lambie. I was going to use everything that I put into my repertoire, from my social media following, my lived experience, my 4 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq, East Timor, all of that, the picture perfect model that was me in my military uniform with my commando beret on and my chest of medals, to finally think that I had one last purpose in life, to take my own life, to cause enough of a cut through that people would realise that the mental health crisis facing our veterans is real. And that comes from nothing more than my own lived experience in mental health and what it's like to transition from the life of being a veteran in service, where the suicide rate is less than half of the national average, to transitioning out of service and losing that purpose, losing that community and losing that identity, and doing what we do best and rapidly adopting the values of too much, unfortunately, of the culture we see outside of the military as opposed to what is within the military. And that culture in the military is that force field that protects us and that net that catches us. You are constantly exposed. You are forced to be your authentic self. You can't just rely on superficial conversations, and your actions and your attitudes are that which define and demonstrate to yourself and others what is going on. And then as I went through the process, I transitioned into the military after finishing school at 17 years of age, and the first ever real identity I had was that military identity. And in particular for me, my deployment to Afghanistan in 2012 with the Special Operations Task Group was what I call the epitome of my life. It was the epitome of my military career, where I basically got to finally run on to the national final with my team. That was a platoon commander that I'd trained with for 2 years, and go out on 67 missions in 5 months and take the fight to those who wanted to bully others, who wanted to oppress women, who wanted to put suicide IED vests on children and blow them up marketplaces. And I got to achieve a level of inspiration with a team that inspired me even further, to the point of I never feared for myself. I feared about letting my team down, and I feared about letting my country down. Through to the point where flying to here from Brisbane, we hit a bit of turbulence and I prayed to God 7 times before we landed. And it's just so fascinating to see how different it is when you're outside of that culture and when you're outside of that community. And after I had my moment and I realised that, hey, why hand this over to someone else to speak on behalf of me? A large part of the issues we've had in the veteran space are too many people talking about us and not enough of us talking for ourselves. And particularly I've heard so many talk about lived experience. And I gained hope from that renewed purpose that I could then step up again to best represent my men, my people, my women, my country, to do so. Then over the last year, particularly engaging with my activities as Voice of a Veteran, I it started off talking to a couple of my friends about my own experience, and 9 out of 10 of them told me that they had something similar. And 6 out of 10 had only ever shared that experience after I told them mine, which was just incredible for me. Then I spoke to my mother and other members of my family, and they told me about how they, at some point in time, had had some form of suicidal ideation or contemplation. And it just makes you feel so much more normal. And the most important part is to never be defined by that. I've just told you a small part of my story, and that is a part of my story. That does not define me. You know, my name is Heston Russell, and what I do today and tomorrow is what defines me. And particularly as we're talking about suicide prevention, I think it's so important to drum home that message that each and every one of us at our own individual level can actually play a part in that, by not allowing people to be defined by their trauma, to helping them to work through that trauma. Appreciate that trauma has to be addressed and lent into. Trauma cannot be glazed over. Its roots grow deeper and you have to go back and dig it out at some time. Now, particularly when it's coming down to this Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide, I was initially actually against it. You know, I didn't want to spend all the money, all this, that and the other. But then as I started travelling around and engaging with so many veterans, so many of them have stories similar to myself. Whenever I speak with a veteran, it could be the first 15 minutes or the first 45 minutes, and they're telling me their story, they're telling me their trauma. And I'm a very practical and pragmatic person. I'm kind of like, okay, cool, let's get to the end. So what now? How can I help you? But then I had to go back and actually learn more and understand more about trauma and know that people have to have that chance to speak and be heard. But they also need to have accountability, because there's no point putting all of that vulnerability out there if it's not going to achieve something, particularly for a community who's been trained to achieve outcomes and knows the right things to do and isn't motivated by profit or things like that. So then the conversation came around about the Royal Commission, the National Commission versus Royal Commission. And then I realised that the Royal Commission had become such a symbol of hope for so many, regardless of the fact that we could spend that money elsewhere and probably achieve those things ourselves. For so many, dating back to our Vietnam veterans and even before, there is so much trauma built up that the only level of accountability they now have trust in was the Royal Commission. And once I understood that it had gone past pragmatic conversations and was now ideological and philosophical, I was then able to have those conversations with those members of Parliament, and here we are now. And this Royal Commission's about to get underway, and what's so much more important about the Royal Commission is providing people with an outlet to get out their trauma, but it's the chance to finally bring our community back together, to have people to sharing these stories. Politicians and everyone else will always talk about the billions of dollars that needs to go into this right and there, and that is absolutely what needs to occur, because we need to have all the way from clinical intervention down to community intervention. I see a psychologist and a psychiatrist once or twice a week, but the best therapy for me is reconnecting with my guys and girls that I serve with, having authentic and vulnerable conversations, and then working together with each other. That's why attending events like this, where people are coming together in a room, is so much of the start of the solution and start of the fixing all these issues that we're having at the moment through isolation and uncertainty. At the moment, we're able to have so many conversations that only ever remain superficial, because we're dealing with the anxiety of constant news cycles and the depression of FOMO, the fear of missing out from all that we're not being able to do. The ability to actually get past those surface level conversations and get into where the healing, the therapy and addressing the trauma is what we need to do more. And like in the military, that came from us being around each other all the time. You couldn't hide from each other. You went out with each other that night. You sometimes lived next door to them. You were always able to be found out at some point when you lowered your guard and had to reveal your true and authentic self if you were feeling vulnerable or weak at any time. So the biggest thing for me is, while there are so many much more qualified, much more clinical in those government departments, in those ministries with the money, it's that community connection. And for me, suicide prevention in my own path to therapy has come from simply reconnecting with each other, not being defined by my story, by my trauma, being authentic enough to realise that there's actually empowerment in vulnerability, and united action can actually achieve greater prevention than any dollar sign we put on these sorts of things. I'd like to thank everyone here today who's come to share these stories, come together to do so, and just please again, embark that takeaway that proactive piece we can do here at that individual community level. And days like Are You OK Day and days like this are great, but we need to get so much more into doing that each and every single day, challenging each other, creating that space for each other, but then also using that as responsibility to make sure we move forward and do whatever we can in our each and everyday lives to achieve that pathway to prevention. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Heston. Appreciate that. As you can see, we've both kept up a very good physical training regime, and obviously I've given him as many tips as I can on those bicep curls, and he's doing really well. Subject. I am getting a photo with CDU after this, so if you could put my head and his body on, sweet. The missus would love that. Rightio.